Hello everybody and welcome to this massive open online course. This MOOC is in the subject of managing and surviving change in community learning and development. I'm Ramone Bishawi and I'm a social researcher who's working for the North Alliance and the University of Aberdeen. And we're working on a project. It's an action research project and it's to explore online learning and how an online learning environment can best serve the community learning and development workforce in Scotland. Karen McArdle and I have already completed cycles of inquiry to find out about what the professional development needs are of community workers, and a further cycle of inquiry involved hosting a mini MOOC which was in supporting community empowerment, and our team, Rachel and Phil, joined us on that, joined us in planning that, and that the subject of supporting community empowerment was very relevant for community workers within Scotland. So it was a great success. It was a 6-week course, much like the one that we're running just now, and we had a range of speakers talking about supporting community empowerment. You can visit that actual, the previous mini MOOC, just go to http://minimooc@wikispaces.com. And you can even complete the course, because that's the beauty of MOOCs, that they're open and you can complete them anytime, so all the materials are there. Now, I should say that as part of this project, I recently presented at the Action Research Network of the Americas, that was in San Francisco. And I know that some of you were attending from there, so a big hello to you all. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce some of the team. So as I've mentioned, we have Phil and Rachel Shanks. So Phil Marston is an educational technology specialist here at the University of Aberdeen, and he's kindly agreed to provide us with an induction and talk a little bit about MOOCs and be our tech steward on the course. And Rachel, she's also a lecturer at the University of Aberdeen and is also providing support and guidance throughout the course. So, Rachel, I know that you don't have much time with us today, so would you like to say a few words and provide a bit of an introduction for us, and then we'll go over to Phil?
Okay. Hi everybody, my name is Dr. Rachel Shanks and I work at the University of Aberdeen with Ramone and Karen and Phil, and I specialise in professional learning, and at the minute I'm very interested in looking at professional learning for people in remote communities. So I've done work with teachers and community development workers. I also teach on community development programmes in Aberdeen, and I've been doing some online teaching. So one master's module I taught last year was completely online using Blackboard Collaborate. So I'm very keen to support the MOOC, and it's just I've got builders in and I'm working from home today, so it would be quite noisy. So I'm just going to, that's my bit for now, and if anyone's got any interesting information about professional learning in remote communities, I'd be very pleased to be in touch. Okay. Bye.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Okay, now I'm afraid Phil's webcam isn't working on the other computer, so he's going to move on to my computer and say a little bit about himself and provide an induction, and then you'll hear from me talking about Google Communities. Thank you. See you shortly.
Hello, folks. I don't know, can you hear me? I'm not hearing anything. Okay, yeah, it looks like the mic's working. Right, so in the spirit of managing change, I've just been tackling the whole issue of my laptop dying with everything that I was preparing on it. So I'm going to try a little experiment here. So if you bear with me for a moment, I'm going to try and open a presentation from Google Docs and share it with you and edit the presentation as we go. So as Ramone had introduced me, I'm an educational technologist at the university, and I'm supporting this project. I'll try and whiz through this since you didn't hear me to begin with. Basically, I was just talking about my reflections on supporting this project as opposed to 15 years ago. I used to run a charity that was supporting community ICT, and one of the things we did was actually offer ICT training. 15 years ago, computers and the software running on them weren't particularly intuitive, and it seemed that it was very easy to go wrong. And so the whole notion of having ICT training seemed much more relevant then. These days, things tend to take place online much more. The software is much more intuitive. All this social networking software that we're using, you can pretty much log in and start using straight away without needing to do any training. And so trying to think about what would be ICT training for taking part in this MOOC, it occurred to me that it was actually much more about the philosophy behind using social networking software, the mindset, and how to approach learning online, rather than anything about using specific tools. So I'm actually technically the tech steward for the project, and I thought it might be interesting to share with you the idea of what a tech steward is. Many of you will be familiar with the work of Jean Lave and Etienne Wenger in talking about something that they called legitimate peripheral participation, which is highly pertinent to community learning and development and highly pertinent to the idea of MOOCs. More recently, Etienne has been involved in something called digital habitats, and in this work on digital habitats, and I'll provide links later on, he talks about something called a tech steward. And I've just put up this definition here from his website. So really that kind of fits in with my role as an educational technologist. I don't know everything about every piece of technology or how to use every piece of technology, but I do have a good sense of what people want to do, and I have a sense of the kind of technologies that are available, and it's about trying to marry those things up. And in essence, that's what we're kind of doing here. So that's a bit about me. I'll add another slide here. The next question I thought we should look at is why are we using a MOOC? So, in the context of community learning and development, it's this idea of how do we support community learning. Now, about 10 years ago, I was working in software development, and one of the things I was really struck by during that process was I was a member of an online development community. It was a worldwide community. It was all just by email, but there was about 4,000 plus members on that community, and you could just send emails to that community, and people were there to help you out, and it was a fantastic learning experience. I've never learned so much in my life as I did in that community, and I don't think any course could provide the kind of learning that was taking place there. I could post a question and there was always somebody anywhere in the world 24/7 available to answer that question, if not many people. The community itself was also really, really supportive. They created examples to illustrate all sorts of different concepts in the software, and very often they created homebrew tutorials to try and communicate how you could do that sort of thing yourself. And it really, really struck me that this was a way to learn. I was at a conference maybe 5 years ago now, and a chap called James Paul G, who writes about the use of computer games for learning, gave a really pertinent example, and I often refer to it as the purple potty example, and I think it's a really nice illustration of the kind of things that take place in online communities that is probably the kind of thing that we try and do in our communities when we're doing community learning and development. So what's the purple potty? Well, the story was that there was this grandmother. She didn't really use computers, but her granddaughter was playing with The Sims, which is a computer game where you have a house and you have a character and you have interactions, and there's no sort of purpose to the game other than to simulate real life. And so the granddaughter was really struck that there was no toilet in the house, in this simulated house, and so she wanted to create a toilet, and she particularly wanted to create a purple toilet or a purple potty. And the grandmother said, oh, I'll help you do that. And so while her granddaughter was away home, the grandmother set about trying to learn how to create this purple potty in The Sims, and joined an online development community, and discovered that actually it was quite a tricky process. But after lots and lots of practice and lots of support from that community, she eventually learned how to build these 3D models and how to import them into The Sims and all that kind of thing. And now she's become one of the very well-respected members of that community, supporting other people while still learning herself from the community, and producing and selling objects in that community. And I think that's just like a really wonderful example of how these kind of tools can help people learn in a very supportive environment, but not necessarily a structured environment. What's that got to do with MOOCs? Well, the very first MOOC I attended was in 2011, and it was a MOOC called MOOC, which was about mobile learning. And Inga de Ward was running that MOOC, and Inga will be presenting to us next week. And this was the first time I actually attended a structured course, and I say structured in inverted commas, that really had the same feel about the kind of learning I'd experienced as a software developer, and the kind of learning and community that was that James Paul G was talking about in the Purple Potty example. And the really striking thing about the MOOC course was there wasn't a single sage on the stage sort of thing. We didn't have a lecturer that was presenting all the way through the course, but the course was delivered by the community. Key members of the community took turns in different weeks to present on their expertise, while in the other weeks they were learning from other members. And that just felt like a really productive, equitable learning environment. And very, very powerful. So that's why we've adopted a similar sort of structure to run this program. The next question is, what is a MOOC? Anyway, so I noticed in people's introductions, there's been a lot of comments about how excited people are to be coming along and joining their first MOOC. So I thought it would be quite important to actually stop and think about what a MOOC is. We've already touched on some of the ideas in terms of online learning, and what I already mentioned there in terms of the MOOC. But I imagine people on this program will have actually started Googling around, trying to find out more about MOOCs and trying to get a sense of what to expect. And and there is a huge amount of information out there, and I imagine people will start to realize that there is no one sort of answer about what a MOOC is, and it might even be a little bit of a confusing picture. So distilling it down, there's probably two distinct sorts of MOOCs that you can think about. There's something called an XMOOC, or commonly called an XMOOC, and that's the kind of thing that you'll quite often read about in things like the New York Times or various newspaper articles or online blogs. And these are referring to the kind of courses being delivered to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people by the likes of Stanford and Harvard in custom environments that they've developed specifically for the purpose. They're massive, they're open, they're online, and they're courses, but they have a very distinctly different feel to the kind of MOOC that we're talking about running here, and that I experienced with the Moby MOOC back in 2011. The kind of MOOC that Moby MOOC was, and that we're talking about here, is actually something called a CMOOC, otherwise known as a community MOOC or a connectivist MOOC, and they have a very, very different feel. While the XMOOCs are like a traditional course, they're delivered very structured. Quite often they just have the one lecturer, the sage on the stage, as it were, delivering very often a series of pre-recorded lectures, and setting assignments and providing discussion forums to discuss the course materials. A CMOOC is much more dynamic, much more flat in terms of its hierarchy. There isn't this notion of the sage on the stage. It's much more community driven, and really it's somewhere where people of like-minded interests can come together, focusing on a particular topic in a semi-structured sort of way. So it's got a sort of structure like a course, that makes it different from some of the online communities that are more around just discussing. So it provides a kind of focus, but at the same time there isn't this sense that there are authorities, there are this top-down hierarchy. It's much more collaborative and discursive. Hopefully that sort of starts to give you a sense of what a MOOC is, and that will come through a bit more as the course goes on, I suppose. And obviously you'll be able to ask questions, and I'm hoping Ramone will be able to feed some questions to me as we go along. One of the key concepts about this that I just wanted to specifically spell out is the fact that MOOCs and community are a really key combination, particularly this notion of CMOOCs.
Rachel said you've switched off the microphone.
Oh.
It's on
no.
It's on again.
Okay. Sorry, that was we just had a visitor there. One of the key concepts behind CMOOCs in particular is the whole notion that knowledge resides in the community. So I'll provide some links to some resources relating to this, but Stephen Downes and George Siemens, one of the early innovators in particularly community-based MOOCs, have a whole sort of theoretical framework around the idea that knowledge actually exists out there rather than in individuals, and the knowledge is the connection between the individuals and those relationships. It's in some ways it's very intuitive. It's the way when we're learning in a more ad hoc and social way amongst communities of shared interest. We kind of know that. We kind of know that somebody knows a little bit about something and somebody else knows a little about something else. And if we all get together, we can swap and share ideas and come up with something that's bigger than some of its parts. And this is kind of, they've developed a framework that kind of formalizes that and explains it a little bit more. But it's the underlying principle behind what we're trying to do in terms of this kind of MOOC. And finally, I'd just like to sort of highlight the whole link between MOOCs and change. It's really striking to me how quickly things change, not just my laptop packing up and me having to do something like this off the cuff and try and work live like this. But when we ran the pilot MOOC, as it ended at the end of last year, we'd actually been running it using a wiki and Google Groups and a number of different tools. That's not unusual in MOOCs, and indeed we were inspired by MobiMOOC in terms of that kind of delivery. But right at the end of that, all of a sudden Google introduced this thing called Google Communities, and we'd kind of wished that a couple of months previously it had existed, because it seemed like it was the ideal environment. I remember at the end of the course actually somebody speaking to me about it, and I think that person is now a participant on this course, and we didn't know anything about Google Communities when we started this particular MOOC, but that person had actually gone away and learnt about Google Communities and was able to help us learn how to use Google Community in order to set up this course. So there was this kind of positive learning cycle going on where we were sharing information in the community was sharing it back, and while things were changing, we weren't necessarily having to know and keep on top of every bit of technology that came out, because there was this this sharing going on. And indeed, last week, the whole interface, you've probably noticed, for Google Communities completely changed. And that just seems typical about using technology and using these kind of environments. And so in terms of using this MOOC as a way of providing a focal point for change in and managing change in community learning and development, it just seems an entirely appropriate place to be doing this. I think one thing that we can take away from this is that the only constant is change, and change isn't a bad thing, that it's going on all the time. And I don't know to what extent the community is going to come up with discussions and ideas about how we actually manage change, because I'm not a change expert, I just live it. But I've lost my train of thought. I think it's not about tools necessarily, and certainly techniques will help, but it's actually about a state of mind, a philosophy and an approach to learning and embracing the environment. Hopefully when Graham does his presentation, I think he's going to be touching on some of similar ideas around this, inspired by Buddhist notions of the universe being in a constant state of flux, and we'll be talking about things like that there. It certainly fits with my own experience and my own coping strategies for dealing with this constant change, either of the tools or of the laptops that fail and things like that. And finally, I think I would just like to say this course as a CMOOC is also something that's in a state of flux. So even after the course ends, because it's open and the tools are always there, and as Ramone mentioned, the previous pilot course is still available and still something where discussions can take place and people can still learn. There's this idea that a MOOC, and particularly a CMOOC, never ends, and it's in this constant state of flux, and it'll always be there, and it'll always be different every time you go back to it, and there will always be new things to learn. So hopefully that's given you a sort of sense of what the whole project is about, and how the technology will work and the kind of ethos behind the technology. And I hope that you can at least take a sense of confidence that really with this technology, it's a matter of there is no such thing as a ICT training that you can jump in and learn how to use the technology. The way you learn to use the technology is by using it and embracing it, and just embracing the unexpected, and together we will carry forward how to deal with change. Okay, so it doesn't appear that we have any questions. In which case, it probably seems reasonable to, if nobody's posting anything else, to probably just end the session there and let the recording upload for people to view and comment on in due course. I will try and maintain the discussion, monitor the discussion area, and make posts. Make responses to any questions that people have. So I'll just hand things over back over to Ramone, and she can help finish that off.
So, hello everybody. I'm back. We've literally been sharing a computer between us here. Lots of stress because the laptop that Phil's just using at the moment doesn't work very well, so I couldn't see your comments that were coming in till probably a few minutes after you posted them. I just wanted to mention that we will have a course activity and the information will be on the Google community. I'm sure that most of you are pretty familiar with how the Google community works, so I don't really want to walk you through the whole process just now, but just to highlight one thing. So basically, I'll try and share my screen with and show you the course activity, so just bear with me. Okay, so I've not quite got it up yet, so okay, it'd be that one. And I need to go back to the community page, the main page there. And so obviously you're all familiar with the community as it stands. As you know, there's been some updates, but it looks pretty good. And you've probably seen on the side, on the left-hand side panel, that we've got about the course, introduce yourself, discussion, inspirations for change, course announcements, and there you go, course activity. So information will be on there very soon. But you can see that I've posted a link. So what we're going to ask you to do is talk about change in a blog. And so we're going to ask you to answer weekly questions about change, and to provide the link in a blog. And this will be, I'm creating a spreadsheet as we speak. So this is a spreadsheet there that will just contain all the blogs that we have from all you course participants. So just give us a chance to kind of get all the course activity ready. Yeah, that's really all I wanted to mention. I guess the other thing to say is that obviously now we have all the links on the right-hand side of the course, and it'd be great, I mean, some of you have already done it, but it'd be great if you could add your location, if you feel like doing, on where in the world are you. And if you're still unsure about what a MOOC is, you can go to our course quiz and look at our frequently asked questions. Yeah, I mean, it'd be great if you've got any questions for me. If there's something you'd like me to clarify, just let me know. And there's one great thing I did want to show you actually, is if you type in a message and you want to alert somebody to the fact that to a comment you're making, you just put a plus sign in your message and add their name. So in this case, I should be able to add Phil to mine. So anyway, it's not coming up just now, but if you put a plus sign and the name, they automatically see that message. No, not working for me. It is new. I did mention as well in the community that we now have hashtags that we can use in Google+. So yeah, if you want to comment about the course, it's hashtag changes. I will post it again. I've posted it a few times. That's also on Twitter, so if you want to comment there. I do apologise for all the technical issues that we've had today, and hopefully from next week we'll really get things going. And I just wanted to thank Phil for his input there, because it was really quite stressful trying to get everything together when a laptop just broke. So okay. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoy the course. It's great to have you all on here, and I look forward to receiving your comments. Thank you. Bye.